Somewhere in your home right now there is a white shirt, clean, folded, completely unremarkable. In 1870, keeping one shirt that colour cost a woman an entire day of her week, every week for her whole life. You already know the machine that ended all of that. It's standing silent in a corner somewhere near you tonight. Sometime this week you'll feed it an armful of clothes, press a button, and walk away, spending less effort in that one gesture than anyone in this story spent on a single sock. In 1870, there was no button, there was a day, one full day every week, that swallowed a woman whole from before dawn until after dark, and every house on this street kept the same appointment on the same morning without fail. They kept it for a reason that makes no sense at all from where you're lying. These are families that count light by the candle and food by the penny. They own almost nothing, and the little they wear they have chosen to keep in the one colour the world attacks fastest. Grey would hide a hard week. Brown would forgive almost anything. White forgives nothing. It announces every mark, every splash, every hour of labour at full volume, and the poorest families on this street will fight hardest of all for it. Tonight you'll spend one whole Monday inside that fight. A small brick house in winter, a copper pot waiting for its fire, and a woman named Martha, 34 years old. She is about to begin right now on Sunday night, while her family sleeps because a proper Monday starts the night before. Stay with her until the last candle, and you'll know exactly what that folded white shirt in your own home used to cost. So let the week loosen its grip, pull the blankets close. Out in the dark, the Sunday evening bells have finished and the street has gone quiet, the particular quiet of the night before the biggest day of the week. The wash begins tonight. It begins with a light under a door, downstairs, in a house that went to bed an hour ago. Someone has struck a match, and on the night before wash day, a lit candle after bedtime means the work has already started. We'll go down in a moment. Two small things first, quietly. This story runs on its own in the dark, so if sleep takes you halfway down these stairs, let it. It keeps going without you. Say in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight, if you'd like to leave something behind before you drift. And subscribing is what keeps a candle lit in this house for next week. Now quietly. She doesn't know we're here. That candle belongs to Martha, and by its light she is the only person awake in this house. Everyone else is in bed. Her husband, Thomas, is asleep. Her 3 children are asleep. The Sunday roast was cooked large on purpose this afternoon, twice what the table needed, and the extra sits covered in the pantry right now, because tomorrow nobody in this house cooks. Tomorrow's dinner was made today. That is how completely Monday empties a household. It reaches backward into Sunday and takes the cooking, and it reaches forward into Tuesday and takes the mending, and the day of rest ends, for the woman of the house, several hours before Sunday is actually over. Down in the kitchen, by that one flame, her working week has quietly already begun, and it begins on the floor with a pile of dirty laundry and a decision about every single piece in it. Watch her hands for a minute and you'll notice something strange. She is not sorting by dirt. The filthiest work shirt and a barely worn Sunday collar can land in the same basket, while 2 garments equally grimy get separated like they'd been caught fighting. Her hands pass over one shirt without slowing, a finer cotton than anyone in this house owns, a stranger's initials stitched small at the collar and set it in its own place, apart, the way you'd handle something you were only holding for someone else. Then they move on because the sorting isn't about how dirty things are. It's about what each piece of cloth can survive, and in this kitchen that comes down to two questions her hands ask of every item, faster than thought. What colour are you, and what are you made of? Of those two questions, colour is the one she settles first, because colour is where the real trap is hiding, among the white clothes on this floor. The whites, as everyone here calls them, there must not be, cannot be, one single piece of cheap red or cheap blue mixed in, and the word cheap is doing real work in that sentence. In 1870, a colour that stays put in the wash costs extra. That's exactly what the expensive cloth is charging you for. The everyday colours on a street like this one are the other kind, the cheap kind, the kind that breaks loose in water and runs. One red sleeve, hiding in tomorrow's white wash, and the escape happens in the hot water. The red lets go, the water carries it, and every white thing in that pot comes out with a pale pink stain that nothing on any shelf can take back out. Not the soap, not the soda. Nothing sold at any price on this street can undo it. The whites would simply be pink now, and to understand what that costs, you have to know what these clothes really are to this family. They are not just clothes. On this street, the wardrobe is the closest thing a working family has to a bank account. Walk into any pawnbroker's shop in this city on a Monday morning and look at the shelves. Gowns, shirts, coats, ordinary clothing, handed over by ordinary families for coins to get through the week, and bought back on payday. Cloth holds its value the way almost nothing else in a poor household does, which means every garment in this pile on the kitchen floor is doing two jobs at once. It dresses a body, and it stands ready to become bread money in a bad week. But the pawnbroker's shelf has the same taste as everyone else in this economy. It pays for cloth in good condition. A pink-stained shift isn't a shift with a flaw. It's savings, destroyed. So when Martha's hands lift one faded red cloth out of the white pile and set it well apart, that small flick of the wrist is not laundry care. It's a woman keeping the family's money from dissolving in tomorrow's water. And even that isn't the whole price of the pink, because a mistake like that cannot be hidden. Tomorrow, everything washed in this house goes out on the line, in the open air, in front of the whole street. There is nowhere else to dry it. Whatever comes out of that copper gets published. And there is no quiet way to retire the whites and dodge the embarrassment either, because the whites are the one kind of clothing this family cannot step away from. They are the underthings, the shifts and shirts worn against the skin, and above all they are the collars and the cuffs, the two small strips of cloth that show at every neck and wrist on this street. The visible inch, the part everyone sees every day on every person. She cannot choose to stop washing them, and she cannot make them any easier. The whites are the one thing this family must own, in the one colour that fights back hardest, and every last piece will be hanging out there tomorrow in the open for the street to read, which is what her hands are deciding right now, by one candle in silence. The second question her hands ask, "What are you made of?" has its own trap, and it's the reason the wool never comes anywhere near this soaking tub. Tomorrow the whites will boil. Wool that meets hot water and rubbing doesn't just shrink, it felts. The fibres lock together into something dense and stiff and smaller, and there is no power on earth that unlocks them again. 20 minutes of good intentions can take a grown man's winter garment and turn it into something that fits his son. The heat stains it yellow while it's at it, as if to sign the mistake. And wool in this family is not fashion. You already know what wool is on this street if you've spent a night here before. It's the 15 pounds of blankets that keep a body alive through a January night. Wool is the family's warmth, bought slowly and kept for decades. So it gets its own gentle wash, cool and quick and barely touched, but not tonight, and never in this tub. Tonight the tub belongs to the whites alone. Now the tub is ready, and Martha fills it with water that is barely warm. She doesn't test it, doesn't think about it. Cool water is simply what goes on the whites first, the way it always has. To her. There is nothing to decide here, but watch a modern hand reach for that same tub, and it goes straight for hot. Hot feels right. Hot feels like it means business, like it's really going to fight the dirt. And that modern hand would quietly ruin the wash. Because Martha knows something about these stains that your instinct doesn't. The worst marks in this pile, blood, egg, and above all sweat, are made of the same stuff as the white of an egg. And you already know what heat does to an egg. It cooks it. Drop a sweat-stained collar into hot water, and the stain doesn't lift. It sets, cooked into the cloth for good. Now think about where sweat sits deepest on a working man's shirt after 6 days. The collar, the cuffs, the visible inch, the exact strip the whole street reads tomorrow. The one part that has to come out perfect is the one part hot water would ruin forever. So the cool water isn't caution, and it isn't old-fashioned. It's a rule with a reason, cold first, to draw the sweat out gently, and only tomorrow, once that's done, does the fire get its turn. Martha couldn't tell you the chemistry. She just knows the way her mother knew that you never give the fire the first move. So in goes the wash, and it goes in her way, one piece at a time, not tipped from the basket in a heap, each shirt pressed under the surface separately, held down with spread fingers until the air bubbles stop and the water takes it. Then the next, then the next. A heap traps pockets of air and floats. The water soaks the outside and never reaches the middle, so the cloth comes out clean to the eye and still dirty at the core. One piece at a time is slower, and it is the only way the water reaches all of it. And there's something in the rhythm, press, hold, release, reach, that the whole rest of this loud, boiling, heaving Monday will never once slow down enough to repeat. This is the quietest work the wash will ever be. It happens tonight by one candle, and no one is awake to see it. The last thing into the water isn't cloth at all. From a jar on the shelf, Martha measures washing soda into the tub, measures with her eyes and her fingertips, because this is the one ingredient tonight that can go wrong in both directions. The soda is why this soak works at all. All night long, while the house sleeps, it will be in the water loosening what? 6 days of work ground into the fibres, hours of tomorrow's scrubbing, dissolved quietly in the dark by the only worker on this street who takes no wage and needs no sleep. But that same worker doesn't know when to stop. Too strong a dose, and the soda finishes with the dirt and starts on the cloth itself, weakening the threads it was hired to rescue. Which is why tomorrow's rinsing will go on again and again, and why tonight's measuring is done slowly, twice. Her hands could tell you the price of getting it wrong either way. They're the proof of the bargain, reddened, cracked open where the fingers bend, roughened by years of soda and strong soap that no glove ever came between. Hands that do the family's cleanest work and are marked by it. Hands she keeps folded out of sight in church. On this street, you can read a woman's Mondays on her skin. Then, one last job before bed. Bucket by bucket, Martha fills the great iron pot in the corner, the copper with cold water, right up to the mark, so it will be waiting for the fire in the morning, and she won't have to haul it in the dark. Only then does the candle go out. She climbs the stairs in the dark, the way her mother did, and behind her the kitchen keeps working, the soda in the water in the cloth, 6 days of a family's labour letting go, fibre by fibre in the dark. Nothing left downstairs is finished, But nothing left downstairs can fail on its own now, either. The reds are in their own corner where they can't reach the whites. The wool is set aside dry, safe from the boil that would ruin it. The whites lie under cool water that is pulling the sweat out slow, exactly as it should. Every trap of tomorrow was closed tonight, by hand, before a single flame touched a single pot. Tomorrow will be loud and hot and heavy in ways this quiet kitchen gives no hint of, and it starts before the sun does, with a luxury this house allows itself exactly one morning a week and counts the cost of all 7 days. Tomorrow this family lights a second fire. That's next. It is still fully dark when Martha comes back down those stairs. The kitchen is colder than the bedroom she left. The cold has settled into the brick floor overnight, and it comes up through her thin stockings the moment she kneels at the small iron door beneath the copper. Above her head, the water is already waiting, cold in the pot where she poured it last night. That much is done, and it was done last night for a reason. The household books of the day put it down as a rule: fill the copper before you sleep. When the very first job of a day has to be pushed back into the night before, that tells you something about the hours coming, because the morning's own first job cannot be moved and cannot be skipped, and the whole day is now waiting on a single thing: catching fire. Every other morning of the week this house lights one fire, the kitchen grate for tea and for warmth, the same fire you already know if you've spent a night on this street. But wash day is the one morning of 7 that demands a second fire, the fire under the copper, and a second fire is not a small thing here. It is coal that has to be bought, carried, and burned on top of the coal the kitchen already needs. It is the reason the household budget marks this one day apart from all the others. Before a single shirt is washed, before a penny of soap is spent, Monday has already cost this family an extra bucket of coal. This is the most expensive day of the week, and the expense begins in the dark, at a cold grate with a woman on her knees. And a cold grate does not want to light. This is the part your century has forgotten entirely, because you have never had to beg a fire to exist with fingers too stiff to feel the match between them. A coal fire cannot simply be lit. Coal will not take a flame. It has to be built, in a fixed order from the bottom up. First a twist of paper, then the kindling, thin dry sticks, laid loose enough for air to climb through, each one biting into skin already cracked from the cold. Only once that is burning, well, does the coal go on, small pieces first, then larger, rush the order, and you get a mouthful of bitter smoke, stinging in the eyes, and a dead grate at the end of it. And the enemy of the whole fragile arrangement is damp. One morning of damp kindling, or a wind pushing back down the chimney, and the flame dies down to nothing, and Martha is back on her knees clearing cold ash with numb fingers, building it again from nothing while the water sits cold and the day refuses to start. And while she kneels there a second time on the coldest floor in the house, her family is still asleep above her. In the warm dark upstairs, Thomas and the 3 children are breathing slow and easy, wrapped in the 15 pounds of wool this street lives under, and not one of them will ever see this part. They will come down later to a warm kitchen and a boiling copper, and think, if they think anything at all, that it simply became so. No one is awake to see it. A woman alone on a freezing floor before dawn, coaxing a flame with hands that hurt, so the people she loves can come down to warmth. There is no resentment in it. There is only the fact of it, the same fact, every Monday of her life. So Martha nurses it the way you'd coax something half alive. A breath of air here, a small piece of coal there, waiting for the moment the flame stops needing her and starts feeding itself. And when it finally catches, when the coal glows and the heat begins to climb the iron side of the copper, she has not finished anything. She has only started the clock, because the water in that pot is cold, and there are gallons of it, and even good copper takes its time. From this flame to a rolling boil is a slow business measured not in minutes, but in the better part of a morning. The fire is lit. Now the whole kitchen simply has to wait on the water, and Martha does not have the kind of morning that allows for waiting, which is exactly why the fire was lit first, and why it was lit in the dark. The heat has to build for hours, so it must be set going before anything else, and while it climbs on its own, Martha does not stand and watch it. She turns to the wash that's soaked all night, because the water can heat itself in the corner while her hands do the next job. On wash day, one thing is always cooking while another is being done. The fire minds itself. The water climbs toward a boil. The whites wait for her hands. A day this long only fits into the daylight if 3 or 4 parts of it are moving at once. But that soaked laundry cannot go anywhere near the boiling water yet. Not straight from the tub, not the way it is now. There is a step in between, and skipping it would undo everything last night's cold soak was for. All night. The soda has been pulling the week's sweat out of the cloth and into the water, which means the water in that tub is no longer clean. It is grey, and it is heavy with everything the fibres let go. Lift the whites straight out of that and into the copper, now dripping, and 2 things go wrong at once. You carry the loosened filth right back into the wash, and the heat finally reaches the sweat still in the cloth and cooks it in for good. The exact thing last night's patience was spent to prevent. So first, every shirt and every collar has to be lifted out and squeezed. Martha plunges her arms into water that has gone cold and sharp with soda overnight, and lifts, and wet cloth does not lift gently. Soaked through, it weighs 3 or 4 times what it did dry, wet, and clinging, and it gives back a smell that has been building in the dark all night. Not soap, but the sour shut-in smell of 6 days of a family's body, pulled loose and left to sit. She squeezes each piece out by hand, twisting the grey water back into the tub until the cloth stops dripping, and only then is it ready for what comes next, which is the loudest, hardest work the cold morning has yet seen. And it starts now, in the dark, with the copper climbing slowly to a boil behind her and the whole house still asleep above. Those squeezed-out shirts go into a fresh tub, and this tub is nothing like last night's. Last night the water just had to sit there and soak. This water has to be worked, and so does Martha. Soaking loosens the dirt. It doesn't take it out. Something has to push the dirt out of the cloth, and in 1870 that something is not a machine. It's a wooden board, a bar of soap, and 2 hands that were already cracked before the day even started. She sets a washboard into the tub, a wooden frame with a row of hard, rough lines cut across it, built for one thing only. Martha picks up a shirt, rubs the soap into it, hard yellow soap, cut from a block, nothing like the soft bars you use, and drags the wet cloth up and down against those rough lines. Over and over. The lines catch the dirt and work it loose. And this exact sound is coming from every house on the street right now, behind every wall, the wet slap and drag of cloth on wood, hundreds of women making the same stroke at the same hour. Monday is Monday for everyone, and not everything gets the board. That is the first judgment of the morning, and it is a trade-off. Dragging cloth over hard lines cleans it, but it also wears it. The same rough surface that pulls the dirt out is slowly pulling the cloth apart. So the board is saved for the worst of it, the ground in dirt, the deepest stains, the parts nothing else will shift. Everything else gets worked by hand in the water alone, gently, because a shirt that comes out spotless and thin is not a win. Every single piece in the pile gets weighed that way in a second. How bad is this? And how much wear can it take? And the answer decides whether it meets the board or not. There is a story in the soap too, and this morning it comes with a decision attached. What is left of the block is smaller than her hand. It has to cover this whole wash and last until the shop money comes on Saturday, and there is a choice in front of her that she makes without appearing to make it. Use enough to shift the worst of Thomas's collar now, or hold some back for the week and let the collar go out a shade less than perfect. She takes the knife and cuts a piece, and it is a slightly bigger piece than she meant to cut. That is the decision made in a second, and it will cost her something on Friday. The soap itself comes as a hard block, yellowish and heavy, cut down into pieces small enough to work with, and it goes on dry and stubborn. Nothing like the soft bar in your bathroom that lathers the moment it gets wet. Some families on streets like this one didn't buy soap at all. They made it at home from fat and wood ash, in a process that could take the better part of a week from start to finish. Whether it was bought or made, it was never treated casually. Soap was money. You used what the job needed and not a shaving more, and you kept the block dry between Mondays so it wouldn't soften and waste away in its own dish. There's even an order to it, and the old household books wrote the names down plainly. The first pass is called the firsting. Shirt turned right side out, soaped, rubbed on the board until the top layer of dirt gives way, then squeezed dry. But one pass was never enough, so she turns the shirt fully inside out, drops it in clean water, soaps it, and does the whole thing again on the other side. That second pass has its own name, the seconding. 2 full scrubbings inside and out, and that's before the shirt even reaches the boiling water, still waiting in the copper. And that's one shirt, the whole week's pile, for 5 people is still sitting on the floor. Some parts of the shirt take much longer than the rest, and it's always the same parts. The body of it comes clean fast, but the collar and the cuffs, the neck, and the ends of the sleeves, the small strip of white the whole street will read tomorrow, are where 6 days of Thomas's work have sunk in deepest, worked in with sweat at the fold where the cloth sits against his neck all day. So those get pulled out and scrubbed on their own. She digs her thumbs into the cloth, presses it hard against the roughest part of the board, and works it until her shoulders ache and the grey finally lifts. The dirtiest spot on the shirt is the exact spot that has to come out the whitest, and that's the whole job in one small picture. The hardest scrubbing goes to the smallest piece of cloth, just because that piece is the one people see, and every stroke of it costs her skin. This is where the price stops being coal and soap, and starts being Martha's own body. Hard soap isn't kind. It's made to cut through oil and dirt, and it can't tell the difference between the dirt in the collar and the skin on her hands. Put that together with the rough board, the cold water, and hours of the same motion, and her hands start to break down. One woman wrote down what it was like the first time she stood at a washtub, and we still have her words. In a single day, she said, the skin had rubbed clean off her hands, and the sting of the soap in the raw places was more than she could stand. She wasn't being soft. That's just what the work does to hands that aren't hard yet, and Martha's went hard years ago, the skin grown thick and tough as an old boot. It's the only reason she can do a full day of this and not stop. Those cracked red hands she keeps folded out of sight in church aren't a sign she's careless with them. That thick, tough skin is the only thing that lets her get through her own Mondays. So the pile shrinks, one double scrubbing at a time, and beside her a basket fills up with the clean whites, grey and twisted, the water squeezed out of them, clean now, as clean as hands alone can get them, but not white yet and not safe yet, because scrubbing only reaches the dirt a hand can reach. It can't reach what's soaked deep into the thread, and it can't do the one thing the whites still need most. It can't kill what's living in the cloth. Only one thing in this kitchen can do that. It's been climbing toward a boil in the corner since before the sun came up, and now it's ready. The copper is boiling now, after a whole morning of climbing, lit in the dark, fed coal by coal, waited on while Martha's hands did everything else. The water has finally reached a full rolling boil, and the scrubbed whites are ready to go in. The white shirts, the sheets, the underthings, every white piece the family owns. This is the stage the whole day has been building toward, and it's the one that does what no pair of hands can do. Because scrubbing has a limit, and Martha has already reached it. Her hands got out the dirt a hand can reach, the mud, the grime, the sweat worked loose on the board. But there is another kind of dirty that lives deeper than any hand can go, down in the thread itself. No amount of rubbing removes it, only heat does. Boiling water reaches all the way into the thread and lifts the last deep stain the board left behind. And Martha knows there is something else in that cloth too, something worse than a stain, something she has to kill. She is certain of it. 6 days against a warm body, and a shirt holds more than sweat. It holds whatever it is that turns a clean house into a sick one. She has watched it happen on this street. A family lets things go grey and foul, and before long there's a cough in that house, then a fever, then a small coffin. So she boils. She believes with total conviction that the heat drives out the thing that carries sickness, and she is right that it does. She is just completely wrong about what that thing is, because in 1870 no one on this street has heard the word germ. What Martha believes she is killing is bad air, a foul, invisible something that rises off dirty cloth and rotting matter and breathes illness into a room. Sickness, in her world, comes from stink. Clean away the smell and you clean away the danger. That is the whole of the science she was raised on, and every mother she knows believes the same. She is not killing a smell. She is killing the tiny living things that actually carry disease. Germs, though she will never once hear them called that. Because the men working that out are doing it in laboratories, she will never hear of either, and the answer will not reach a kitchen like this one for another 30 years. She has it wrong, and she is doing it right, and the pot in front of her does not care which. Every Monday, by the potful, she kills off what would sicken her children, while believing she is only chasing away a bad smell. That belief that clean cloth stands between her family and death is doing quiet, powerful work under this entire day. We'll come back to how far it reached, and what it cost. For now, the boil is the one step that finishes what the hands started. But before the whites go anywhere near that boil, there is one more thing to settle, and it has been waiting in the corner since last night. Martha takes a heavy ladle, dips it into the copper, and carries hot water out of it into a smaller tub, the coloured clothes, the reds and the browns, and the working things, the ones she set well away from the whites in the dark. They cannot be boiled. The boil would strip the colour straight out of them. So they get this instead. Water that came out of the copper second, already going off the boil, poured into a tub in the corner where they will sit and soak out of the way. The whites get the fire, the colours get a ladleful and a corner, and they will be done and out on the line by early afternoon, while the whites are still going through their third rinse, because the colours only have to be clean, and the whites have to be something else entirely. Now you cannot put your hands in boiling water, So the tool changes. Martha reaches for a long wooden stick. Some households used a plain pole, others a kind of wooden dolly with short legs on the end, made for exactly this, and with it she lifts the heavy, dripping whites and lowers them into the copper, then pushes them under and turns them over and over, so every part meets the heat. From across the room it looks almost gentle. It is not. The steam comes straight up into her face. The pot is heavy with soaked cloth, and one careless movement sends boiling water over the edge. And all of this, the boiling pot, the tubs of scalding water lifted off the heat to cool, is happening in the one room the whole family lives in. There is no separate laundry room on this street. The same floor where the copper boils is the floor where the children play, which turns this bright, steaming, ordinary-looking corner of the kitchen into the most dangerous place in the house, not for Martha, but for someone much smaller. And your century gets this next part wrong almost every time. Watching this scene, your mind reaches for the modern dangers, the open flame, the harsh soap, the strong chemicals. Those are real, but the danger that frightened these families most was quieter than any of them, and it was sitting right there in plain sight. The water itself. A pot of boiling water, or a tub of scalding water lifted off the heat to cool, set down low in a room where a small child is playing on the floor. Because a house on this street has one room where the work happens and the children are in it, James, the oldest at 7, can be told to keep back. But the little ones can't be reasoned with, and a tub of scalding water at floor level sits exactly at the height of a curious child. This was the fear that lived under every wash day, not because it happened constantly, but because when it did, it was so easy and so final. And that is exactly why it mostly didn't happen. The danger was so obvious to every mother on this street that the whole day was built around never letting it come to pass, which is why Martha's care isn't only for the cloth. Every hot tub in this kitchen goes up onto a bench or a stool, never left on the bare floor. The little ones are kept to the far side of the room or out of it. Nothing full and scalding gets carried across a space where a child might be walking. She learned these rules the way she learned everything else about this day from her own mother in this same kind of room, and she follows them without thinking, every single wash day, because the whole point of the rules is that the accident never gets its one chance. The danger is real and it is handled, and only because it is handled can the rest of the morning go on. The monster in this kitchen isn't the fire, it's the water, and Martha has spent her whole life keeping it up on a shelf where it can't reach the floor. So the whites turn in the boil, safe above the children, killing off the last of what the hands couldn't touch. And when they come out, grey no longer but not yet the white this whole day is for, they carry more heat and more water than a bare hand could ever manage. They have to be cooled and lifted and pressed nearly dry before anything else can happen to them. And the tool that does that, the machine standing ready in the corner, is the one piece of this kitchen that will bite back. The whites come out of the boil soaked and steaming, holding more water than any arm could squeeze out by hand. And there is a machine for exactly this, the one machine in the whole kitchen, standing in the corner, the mangle. 2 heavy rollers, one above the other, turned by a hand crank on the side. You feed the wet cloth into the gap between them, turn the handle, and the rollers press the water out as the cloth passes through, squeezed flat and half dry on the other side. It does in one pass what Martha's hands would take 20 twisting pulls to do. On a day like this, it is the closest thing to mercy the kitchen offers, and it is the most dangerous object in the house, more than the fire, more than the boiling water she just handled, because the fire and the water only hurt you if you're careless. The mangle hurts you if you're careless for half a second. Those rollers do not know the difference between a wet sheet and a hand. Feed the cloth in, and the machine pulls it through on its own, and if a finger goes in with the cloth, the rollers take the finger too, and keep turning, and pull the whole hand in after it. No quick release, no soft edge, nothing stops on its own. Just two iron rollers doing the job they were built for on whatever reaches them. And that machine standing in the corner is not something every house on this street has. A mangle is a real piece of equipment, heavy and expensive, well beyond what most households can put down at once. So they did what people always do. They paid for the use of it. The weekly budgets written down at the time have a line for exactly this: 3p a week to send the washing out to be mangled, in the same short list that spends 6p on soap and starch and blue and soda. 3p doesn't sound like much until you remember what those pennies were fighting for. And it means the machine in Martha's kitchen is not just a tool. It's a small mark of where this family sits, a household that owns its own rollers and doesn't hand 3p a week to someone else, and can even take in a neighbour's basket because of it. There are things you don't put through it, and knowing them is part of the job. Buttons are the first. A button caught between two iron rollers doesn't survive, and neither does the cloth around it. So buttons get felt for and folded away from the gap on every single piece. Anything with a hook, a stiff seam, or a mend that might catch gets the same care. And nothing goes in twisted, because a fold pressed flat by those rollers can set a crease into the cloth that no ironing will fully take out. Every piece has to go in flat, straight, and checked, one at a time, in a day that has no spare minutes left in it, and the hands that reach them more often than not are small. James is 7. His hands are the size of a teacup. This is the job that gets handed to a child. Turning a crank doesn't take skill, only patience. So the mangle is where a 7-year-old like James earns his place on wash day feeding cloth, turning the handle standing right at the mouth of the one machine that bites. The written records of the time carry the results plainly, and so do the memories families passed down. It was, in the words of one, by no means unusual for a child to get their fingers caught in the rollers. One mother left an account of hearing a scream, running down the stairs, and finding her small daughter with her whole arm drawn into the machine and the bone broken in 2 places. The child lived, many did, but it happened so often that doctors gave it a name of its own. They called it ringer arm, ringer being the other word for these rollers, and every doctor knew what it meant the moment he heard it. One child, one machine, the same accident, in house after house after house. So the mangle, like the boiling water, comes wrapped in rules, and these rules are taught earlier and harder than any other, because the cost of forgetting is a hand. Never let go of the cloth until it's clear through. Never reach after something that slips. Keep the little ones back from the crank entirely. They can watch, they can carry, but they do not feed. James knows these rules the way Martha knows her own, not as advice, but as the fixed border of the machine, the line you simply do not cross. And there is something else going on at that crank, quieter than the rules. He feeds the cloth in, fingers well back, and turns. She takes it as it comes out the far side, and the two of them fall into a rhythm without a word passing between them. Feed, turn, catch, fold. He is 7, and for this one job he is not underfoot and not a worry. He is useful, and he knows it, and she lets him know she knows it by never once telling him to be careful while he is doing it right. It is the closest thing to a conversation they will have today. The flattened whites come out the far side, and nothing goes wrong, because on this street, doing it right is the only version of doing it that anyone survives to remember. And now the whites have nearly all their water pressed out, clean, boiled, pressed, and finally light enough to lift without soaking her skirts. Everything the boiling water could do to them is done, or almost, because the cloth coming out of that copper is carrying something Martha put into it herself, on purpose, hours ago, and if it stays in the thread, it will go on working long after wash day is over against the skin of the people who wear it. The whites are clean now, the white shirts and sheets, the collars and cuffs the whole street will read tomorrow. They are also full of soap, and that is a problem the size of the whole morning so far, because everything Martha used to get the dirt out is still in the cloth, the hard soap, the washing soda, all of it soaked deep into the thread during the boil, and all of it has to come back out before a single shirt can go on a body. Clean cloth full of soap is not finished cloth. It is a fresh danger wearing the disguise of a job well done. Here is why it can't be skipped. That soap and soda were chosen for one reason. They cut through grease and dirt without mercy. They do not stop being harsh just because the dirt is gone. Leave them in the cloth. Let it dry, and put that shirt against skin all day, and the same chemicals that strip the collar clean go to work on the neck wearing it. It itches first, then it reddens, then, on the thin skin of a child or in the fold of a joint where the cloth sits closest, it burns a raw, weeping sore from a shirt that looked spotless on the line, and the cruelty of it is exact. The soap collects worst in the same places the dirt did. The collar, the cuffs, the underarms, the tight folded places. The very parts scrubbed hardest are the parts now holding the most soap, waiting against the softest skin. So the soap has to come out, and there is only one way to do it. Rinse it in clean water again and again, not once. The household manuals of the day are specific. 3 cold waters was a common rule, 3 full rinses in fresh water, each one carrying away a little more of what the last one left behind. And every one of those clean waters is water Martha carried. This is the hidden cost buried inside the word rinse. It sounds like the easy part, the gentle finish after the hard work. It is not. And the water alone runs up a bill. Filling the copper this morning already took gallons hauled in by the bucket 20-30 more, everyone carried from the pump or the well at the end of the street, because no water comes out of a wall in this house. And now the rinsing asks for that all over again 3 times. Each rinse tub gets filled with clean water. It gets used until it clouds with soap. Then it gets emptied, lifted, tipped, carried out, poured away, and filled again from scratch for the next round. Fill, use, empty, fill. The rinsing is where the water bill of wash day quietly doubles, and every gallon of it moves on Martha's own 2 arms. And it is cold work, deliberately cold. The rinse water is not heated, partly to save the coal, partly because cold water sets the whites and closes the cloth. So after a morning bent over steam and boiling copper, Martha now plunges her raw hands into tub after tub of cold water, working each shirt through, lifting it, pressing it, checking it. She is looking for one thing, the water. As long as the water clouds and foams when she works a shirt in it, there is still soap in the cloth, and it is not done. Only when a shirt goes into clean water and the water stays clean does that piece pass. One shirt might clear in 2 rinses. Another, thick at the collar, takes all 3 and part of a 4th. She reads each one by the water it leaves behind, and all of it happens bent forward at the same low tub, for hours. This is the part of wash day that outlasted the hands. The household advice books of the century warned women directly about it. Not the soap, not the heat, but the back, the long hours bent over the washtub that wore a woman's back down slowly, year after year. The hands turn to tough skin and survive. The back keeps count, and it never forgets a Monday. Martha is 34, and on a cold morning she can already feel where the count is going. And down on the brick floor, out of the way of the tubs, 5-year-old Alice sits with her back against the wall and watches. She is not helping. She is too small to reach over the rim of a tub, and nobody has asked her to do anything. She is just watching her mother's hands go into the cold water and come out again, over and over the way she has watched them every Monday she can remember. This is the stage where the little hands earn their place, and where a second basket in the corner finally starts to make sense. James carries water. Small loads, a child's loads, but back and forth, tub to tub all morning. And near him on the floor sits that other basket, the one that has been in the corner of this kitchen since last night, cloth that is finer than anything this family owns, marked with initials that are not theirs. It goes through the same rinses, handled with the same care, maybe more. Martha treats it as carefully as her own, more carefully, because a mistake in that basket costs her something her own mistakes never could. She does not explain it to the children, and they have long stopped asking. It waits its turn in the cold water alongside the rest. By the time the last rinse runs clean, the morning is gone. Every shirt has been sorted, soaked, scrubbed twice, boiled, pressed through the mangle, and rinsed 3 times over. And it still is not white. It is clean. Clean is not the goal. Clean was never the goal. There is one more thing these whites need before they are ready for the line. One last touch that has nothing to do with getting the dirt out and everything to do with fooling the eye, and it is the strangest trick in the entire day. To make the whites whiter, Martha is about to make them blue. It makes no sense until it does. Not much, a trace, but blue on purpose, into the last rinse water, and to a modern eye watching over her shoulder, it looks like she is about to ruin a whole morning's work. She has spent all day fighting to get these shirts white. Why would she now, at the very last step, tint them with colour? The answer is one of the oldest and cleverest things in this whole day, and once you understand it, you will never look at a box of laundry soap the same way again. The problem she is actually solving has nothing to do with dirt. White cloth does not stay white. Even perfectly clean, even boiled and rinsed until the water runs clear, white fabric slowly turns a faint yellow with age and washing and sunlight. It is not dirt. Scrubbing can't touch it. It is just what old white cloth does. It yellows. And a yellowed white, no matter how clean, looks tired, grey and poor. So Martha faces a problem that has nothing to do with cleanliness any more. The shirts are clean, they are just the wrong shade of clean. And the fix is a piece of pure eye trickery. Yellow has an opposite, a colour that sits directly across from it, and that colour is blue. Put a little blue next to a little yellow, and to the human eye the two cancel each other out, and what's left looks not yellow, not blue, but a brighter, cleaner white. This isn't opinion or old wives' wisdom, it's how eyes actually work. So a tiny amount of blue in the rinse water settles into the cloth, just enough to erase the yellow, and the whites come out looking whiter than truly clean cloth ever could on its own. She is not colouring the shirts, she is deleting a colour that was already there. The blue itself comes in a small block, indigo or a factory-made blue sold by the penny, and it stains anything it touches, including hands, so it's tied up in a little cloth bag and swirled through the water rather than dropped in loose. Too little does nothing. Too much, and the whites come out faintly, unmistakably blue, a different kind of ruined, and just as visible on the line tomorrow as a pink stain would be. So this, like the soda and the soap before it, is a job of judgment, the right amount, felt by eye and by habit, swirled through until the water is just barely tinted, and no more. Even the last prettiest step of wash day is a place you can get it wrong. And now look at what that means about the money. When people at the time wrote down what a working family spent in a week, the cleaning things came as one short line: soap, starch, glue and soda, 6p together every week. 4 things on one line. Soap gets the dirt out, soda helps it. Starch does a real job too, and blue does nothing at all to make a shirt cleaner. Blue only changes what your eye sees, yet there it sits, budgeted in the same breath as the soap, in a household that counts every single penny and goes without plenty of things it would rather have. That is how far this went. A family that measured its light by the candle was paying, week after week, for a colour that fools the eye, because looking clean and being clean were not the same thing, and only one of them was on public display. And that trick never went away. It reaches all the way into your own home. Open your laundry cupboard tonight and look at the detergent. There's a good chance it's blue or promises brighter whites on the label. The chemistry is more advanced now. The machines add agents that glow faintly under light to push the same effect further. But the core idea is exactly Martha's: fight yellow with blue and fool the eye into seeing a whiter white. She is doing by hand with a penny block of indigo in a cloth bag the identical thing your washing machine does for you tonight without a word. She just has to know why it works, and do it herself and get the amount right. One more piece of knowledge this day demands, and yours quietly handles for you. So the last rinse takes its faint blue tint, and the whites pass through it one by one. And here, for the first time since before dawn, Martha gets something back. She lifts a shirt out of the water and holds it up, and it is white. Not grey, not tired, not the colour of a hard week. White teen hours of cold and heat and lifting, and this is the moment they turn into something you can see. She does not say anything, and there is nobody in the kitchen to say it to. She just holds it up a second longer than she needs to. Then it goes in the basket with the rest, and she reaches for the next one. But she held it up. That second is hers, and it is the only wage this part of the day pays. Every shirt, every sheet, every collar, squeezed out, checked, and stacked wet in the basket, ready. And now, finally, they can leave the kitchen. But the kitchen was the private part. Out there, in the cold, on the line, in front of everyone, is where all of this work finally gets read, and by the only judges whose opinion can actually change this family's life. The judges are outside, and the basket is by the door. Martha is about to pick it up and carry it out to them. It is heavy. Wet cloth always is, and she will hold it against her hip with one arm while the other works the latch. Stop her there for a second, with the weight in her arms and the cold coming in through the open door, and ask the question that has been sitting under this whole day. Why? Why put a body through all of this? The dark morning, the boiling water, the raw hands, the aching back, the danger, the cost, and put it through again next Monday, and every Monday for a basket of shirts. And above all, why for white? Why chase the one colour that fights back hardest, in a house that can barely afford the soap to chase it with? There has to be a reason big enough to be worth a life spent this way. And there is, but it isn't about clean clothes at all. It is about where these whites are about to go, not into a drawer, not anywhere private. They are about to be carried outside and hung on a line, strung across the yard or over the street, in the open air, in full view of every single person who lives nearby. And that line was not just for drying. Nothing you own does what that line did. It was a public notice board, and on the same morning every family on the street was posting to it. Because in 1870 there is no other way to prove what kind of family you are. Nobody can look inside this house. They cannot see the food in the pantry, or the coal in the scuttle, or whether the children went to bed fed. All a neighbour has to go on is what gets carried out of the door and held up where she can see it. And once a week, on Monday, every household turns itself inside out and hangs its most private cloth in the most public place there is. The whole street reads it at a glance, whose sheets are grey, whose husbands' collars are grey at the neck, whose whites are truly brilliantly white. It is the one day a week the inside of every home is on display, and everyone knows how to read it, because everyone is being read at the same time. And what it says is not, "This family is clean." It says something much larger and much heavier. A line of bright white washing says, "This family has not given up." It says there is a woman here who still has the strength and the discipline and the self-respect to fight a fight she cannot win, and win it anyway, one more week. Grey washing doesn't just look dirty. It looks like something has gone wrong inside that house. Illness, drink, a mother too worn down to stand at the tub, a family starting to slip, on a street where everyone is one bad month from real trouble. A grey wash line is the first visible sign that a family is going under. Nobody says it out loud. They don't have to. They just see the line and they know. And what they know does not stay on the line. The woman 2 doors down is out at her own line at the same hour this morning, with her own wet basket on her hip, and she can see your sheets from where she stands. That same woman is the one you will knock on for a half loaf on a Thursday, or ask to watch the baby for an hour. Her hands will hold your child. Her eyes have already read your washing. The respectable families, the ones with the white lines, kept a careful distance from the ones who were slipping, because respectability on this street was a fragile thing, and it was kept by not being seen with those who had lost it. There was even a phrase for the kind of family you didn't want to be, not the sort that would sit on the doorstep. Clean, upright, indoors, in order. The white line was the proof you belonged on the right side of that line, and the grey one was the proof you didn't, and it reached even the money. The corner shop on this street runs on credit. It has to, because wages come weekly and hunger comes daily, and every family carries a running tab, whether the shopkeeper extends that credit, and how far is a judgment about whether your family is reliable, whether you pay, whether you're the kind that keeps things together. And one of the ways a shopkeeper reads that without ever asking is by what hangs on your line. The whitewash is not only reputation, it is creditworthiness spelled out in cloth, where the whole street, the shop included, can check it every Monday. So this is what Martha's raw hands are really for. Not clean shirts. A place in the world. Every scrubbed collar is a small argument made in public, that this family is still holding on, still strong, still decent, still worth trusting, still worth lending to. The white is a language, and everyone on the street speaks it, and Monday is the day it gets spoken loudest. She isn't washing clothes. She is publishing one more time the single sentence that keeps a working family safe. We are still the kind of people you can count on. And she publishes it in the only ink she has, bright, impossible, hard-won white, which is exactly why the woman 2 doors down, the one whose own line is always white, has started taking in other people's washing for money. Because if white cloth is worth this much, if it can be read, trusted, and turned into money, then a woman who can produce it can sell it. And for some women on this street, that skill is the only thing standing between them and the workhouse. And there is a basket in Martha's own kitchen that has been waiting since the very first sort last night, finer cloth than this family owns, marked with initials that are not theirs. It has gone through every stage of today alongside her own. It is time to say whose it is, and why a woman already running a day this hard would take on a single stitch more. It belongs to someone else. Martha is being paid to wash it. A slightly better off household a few streets over sends its linen to her, and she folds their wash day into her own. That is what the fine cloth in the corner has been this whole time. Not a mystery, but a job. And she is far from alone in it. Up and down this street, and every street like it, there are women taking in other people's laundry for money. The reason is simple, and it is the hardest reason there is. For a great many of these women, this is the only money they can earn. The only money because of who these women are. A widow whose husband's wage stopped the day he died and never came back. A wife whose husband is sick or hurt or out of work or drinks the wages before they reach the table. A woman whose man is away with the army for months or gone for good. In 1870, a woman in any of those situations has almost no way to earn. The respectable trades are closed to her. A factory means leaving her children alone all day. Going into service means living in someone else's house and giving up her own children entirely. And the children are the whole of it. Taking in washing is one of the very few ways a woman can earn real money without leaving her home and losing them. She can work at the tub and the line all day and still be there, still feed them, still watch them, still keep the family under one roof. Other women in her position had their children taken and placed in the workhouse, or sent out to service at 7 or 8 years old, or lost to the orphanage. The wash-tub is what stands between this woman and that. Every basket she takes in is a week her children stay hers. So the work is a kind of freedom, and the century punished her for it. A woman who ran her own washing trade answered to no husband and no master. She set her own hours, took her own money, spoke plainly, and worked with her sleeves rolled up and her arms bare. And for exactly that, the respectable world looked down on her. A laundress was seen as coarse, unwomanly, not quite decent. The same independence that kept her children fed made her, in the eyes of the street, a little less respectable than the wife who had a husband to keep her. She saved her family and lost standing for doing it. That was the bargain, and she took it, because the other side of the bargain was the workhouse, and it was never steady. This is the cruelty underneath the freedom. Washing work came and went with the seasons and with luck, busy one month, gone the next, drying up the moment a richer household decided to economize or a steam laundry opened nearby. A woman could lose half her income in a week and have no one to appeal to. The newspaper records of the time follow these women through hard lives, and the same few words come up again and again: poverty, uncertainty, and the workhouse always waiting at the far edge of a bad season. The freedom was real, so was the drop beneath it, and that drop is why Martha lifts that stranger's shirt out of the rinse water with even more care than she gives her own, smoothing it, checking it, making sure not one thing is wrong with it. That care is not habit. It is fear, and it is counting. A ruined shirt means an angry customer. An angry customer means lost work. Lost work for a woman with no husband's wage behind her means the edge of the cliff this whole trade exists to keep her family away from. She is not just washing a richer neighbour's linen. She is holding her own household together with it, one careful basket at a time. And every basket, hers or theirs, is now clean, boiled, rinsed, blued, and pressed nearly dry. There is nothing more the inside of this house can do. Everything now depends on getting them out onto the line and dry. And that last step, the one that finishes the whole day, is the one thing in all of this that Martha does not control. Because it belongs to the sky, and the sky is the one thing in this whole day she cannot argue with. The basket by the door is full now, clean, boiled, rinsed, blued, pressed nearly dry. Every white thing the family owns, and the stranger's fine cloth too, all of it washed by hand and ready. There is only one job left, and it is the only one she cannot finish by working harder. She has to dry it. Every other step today answered to her hands. This one answers to the weather. So before she carries a single basket outside, she does what every woman on this street does first on a Monday. She reads the weather. Not for comfort, for strategy. She looks at the sky for heavy cloud. She looks at the ground to see if the stones are dry. That is the old rule, plain and simple, dry pavement and no heavy cloud overhead, and the wash goes out. Anything else, and it stays in. Because a full day of the hardest work in the week can still be undone in the last hour by a single dark cloud. And she has watched exactly that happen, and she is not going to be caught by it if she can help it. Say the sky is kind today. Then something happens out there that is worth standing in the doorway for. A sheet on a good winter wind does not flap. It cracks. A sharp, clean snap you can hear from inside the house, and it means the air itself is doing the work now for free, for the first time all day. Nothing is being lifted. Nothing is being paid for. And when she brings those sheets in at 3 in the afternoon, they come through the door, stiff with cold, smelling of ice and open sky, and that smell goes right through the warm kitchen. It is the one part of wash day that gives something back instead of taking it. The whites go out on the line, the shirts, the sheets, the collars and cuffs, and even that has a trick to it your century forgets. The line itself is just a length of thin rope strung between hooks or trees, and if it has been left out in the open, it is filthy, coated in the same soot and grime that hangs in the air of every town with chimneys. Hang a clean white sheet on a dirty line, and you have just striped it grey, and undone an hour of work in a moment. So the line gets wiped down first, every time, before one clean thing touches it. Even the drying has a rule you can get wrong, and it is the first rule of the day that anyone else will ever see her keep. Everything Martha has done since before dawn, every secret decision, every scrubbed collar, every careful rinse has happened inside, by candle and firelight, seen by no one. Now it all goes up on the line, in the open air, for the entire street to read at a glance. This is the moment the work stops being private labour and becomes a public statement. But that is a judgment for the next chapter. For now, the simple physical fact: on a good day the wind and the weak winter sun do in a few hours what no fire indoors could match, and by afternoon the whites come in stiff with cold and smelling of outside, and the day is nearly won. But say the sky is not kind either. It was already closed when she looked. Heavy cloud, rain started, the fog down thick and wet the way it does all winter, and the basket never crosses the doorstep at all. Or worse, it looked fine at 10, and by 1 it has turned, and she is out there pulling everything off the line in the rain with her arms full and her skirts soaking. Either way it ends in the same place, and wash day turns into something much worse than a hard day's work. The wet washing stays inside into the one warm room, the kitchen, and there's nowhere near enough space for it. It gets draped over a wooden frame by the fire, hung over the fireguard, strung on lines across the room, crowded into every warm inch there is. And now the family lives inside a wet cloud. The windows run with water. The air turns thick and damp and cold-smelling. Everything feels cold and damp to the touch. And it does not clear in an hour. A full wash, dried indoors in winter, can take days to finish. Days of ducking under dripping sheets to reach the fire. Days of a house that never quite feels dry or warm. The rain doesn't just delay the wash, it moves into the house and stays. And even the air outside could turn on her, worse in the city than in the country. A town in 1870 runs on coal. Every house, every workshop, every chimney pouring smoke into the same sky. On a still, damp day that smoke doesn't rise and leave. It sinks and hangs and mixes with the fog into a thick, dirty cloud that settles on everything. Hang your bright white washout into that, and it can come back in dirtier than it went out, spotted with soot, greyed by the very air. So the woman drying her wash isn't only watching for rain. She is reading the whole sky, weighing wind against smoke, against cloud, making a bet with no certainty in it, on the one step of the day that all the others were building toward. And when the whites finally do come dry off the line or down from the frame, hours or days later, they are clean, they are white, they are ready. Except for one last thing. A dry, clean, honest white shirt is still, at this point, soft, limp, shapeless. And to Martha, and to the street she will hang it in front of, a limp collar is not finished at all. There is a final step coming, one that turns soft cloth hard as a board on purpose. And the reason why is one of the strangest ideas left in this whole day. Martha takes the dry, clean collars, soft, floppy, honest cloth, and she is about to make them hard, stiff as paper, so rigid a collar could almost stand on its own on the table. And to her, this is not ruining them, this is the step that makes them right. A soft collar, to her eye and to the whole streets, looks unfinished, careless, poor. A hard collar looks correct. That is simply the truth. She lives inside. The same way you know a wrinkled shirt looks worse than a smooth one. Nobody has to explain it to her. Stiff is proper, soft is not. But there is a reason underneath that one, a practical, almost secret reason, and it is cleverer than the fashion. The stiffening comes from starch, and starch does something to a collar that has nothing to do with how it looks. It sets a trap for dirt. When you coat a collar in starch, the next week's sweat and grime sink into the starch layer instead of into the cloth itself. The dirt sticks to the coating, not to the shirt, and next Monday, when the collar goes back in the wash, the dirty starch simply dissolves and washes away, and takes the week's grime out with it. The starch is a shield, a hard, shiny shield laid over the exact part of the shirt that gets dirtiest, so that the dirt lands on something removable instead of grinding into the thread. Starch a collar, and you save it from the very wear that would ruin it fastest. The stiffness people showed off was the visible edge of something practical, a coat of armour for the visible inch, thrown away and remade every single week, out of something that costs money, or doesn't, because starch does not have to be bought at all. It can be, and Martha's budget has room for a little. It sits in that same weekly sixpence with the soap and the blue. But starch is simply the white powder that lives inside ordinary food, and a woman who knows what she's doing can pull it out of the kitchen instead of the shop. It was made at home from wheat, from rice, from grated potato, even from the cloudy water left behind after boiling potatoes for dinner, which is starch already, given away free by a meal you were cooking anyway, on a street where sixpence has to cover 4 different things that matters. The woman who can make her own starch out of last night's potato water has just bought herself a little more soap, and not everything gets it. This is a hierarchy, and everyone knows the order without being told. Collars get starched, cuffs get starched, aprons, petticoats, a Sunday shirt front, the pieces that show, the pieces that must hold their shape in public. The body of a work shirt does not. Sheets do not. Anything that lives out of sight stays soft, because starch costs money and time, and you spend both only where they will be seen, even at the very end of the day, with the light gone and her arms aching. Martha is still sorting the world into what the street will look at and what it won't. Making it is its own small science, and this is the part of the day Martha is best at. She stirs the powder into cold water first, cold, always cold to start, and works out every lump with her fingers, because a single lump will dry into a hard white spot on a collar tomorrow, plain for everyone to see. Only once it is smooth does the boiling water go in, poured slowly, stirred without stopping. And then comes the moment she is watching for. The thin, cloudy milk turns all at once into something thick and clear and glossy. There is a second where it happens, and she catches it every time. Nobody taught her the chemistry of that, and she could not name a single thing that occurs in the pot. She only knows the exact look of the water, half a breath before it changes, and how fast to stir, and when to stop. She has taken the water left over from last night's potatoes and turned it into tomorrow's armour, and she has done it standing up at the end of a 14-hour day without measuring anything. Stir too slow and it lumps. Boil it wrong and it loses its hold. She's done it 10,000 times, and she still watches it like it might turn on her, because at this last stage of a 14-hour day, a careless pot of starch can undo the collar that matters most, and it is always Martha standing over that pot. Every part of this, the dark morning, the boiling, the raw hands, the aching back, the starch at nightfall, falls to the woman of the house. Measure this day by nothing but body strength, the lifting, the hauling, the twisting of water out of soaked cloth, the gallons carried in by the bucket, and it comes out as some of the heaviest work anyone in this family does all week. Heavier than plenty of what their men are paid wages for. A farmer's wife of the century wrote it down plainly in her own diary. Washing, measured by the plain strength it took, was a man's work, not a woman's, and it never once landed on a man. It was hers, always hers, and no one on the street thought to ask why. That question, why the hardest physical job in the house belonged without exception to the person the age called the weaker one, is one we will come back to before this night is done. For now the starch is made and cooling. The collars and cuffs get dipped and worked through it, squeezed out and set aside just damp. Because starch alone doesn't make them hard. It only loads the cloth. Turning that loaded cloth into a smooth, glassy, board-stiff collar takes one more thing, heat and weight, and a heavy piece of iron heated in the fire until it's almost too hot to bear. The last tool of the day is also the oldest, and the one most likely to burn her before the night is over. Martha's iron is a solid block of cast metal with no cord, no dial, and no heat of its own. To make it work, Martha heats it in the fire, sets the flat face toward the coals, and waits until the whole block is dangerously hot. There is no way to measure it, so she tests it the way every woman on this street tests it. She wets a fingertip and touches the iron for a fraction of a second, or spits on the face and watches. Too cool, and it drags and does nothing. Too hot, and it scorches a brown mark into a white collar in half a second. A whole day's work ruined at the very last step, on the very piece that matters most. The right heat lives in a narrow band between useless and ruined, and she finds it by feel, by sound, by a lifetime of knowing. And the iron is heavy, 5 pounds, sometimes closer to 10, a solid lump of metal she lifts and presses and pushes across the cloth over and over. She works with 2 of them because one is always cooling. While she irons with the hot one, the second sits in the fire coming up to heat. When the first fades, she swaps them, and the cooling one goes back to the coals. There is no pause in it. Iron, swap, reheat, iron. And by 9 at night, something quiet happens in this kitchen. The corners have gone cold. The copper is dead. The day is over everywhere except this table, and the heavy iron in her hand is now the warmest thing in the room. There is a rhythm to it that empties the mind, the soft hiss when the hot face meets damp cloth, the smell of warm cotton lifting into the dark, the walk to the hearth, the swap, the walk back, lift, press, slide, swap, lift, press, slide, swap. It is the only part of this whole day that repeats gently, and after 14 hours of cold water and lifting, gentle repetition is very close to rest. Her arm carries that weight through the whole last stretch of the day, long after the light has gone, pressing each starched collar and cuff into something smooth and hard and gleaming. This is the step that turns a loaded, damp collar into that stiff, glassy shell, the heat setting the starch into armour, exactly where the shirt needs it most. She lifts the iron and holds the flat of it close to her cheek, a hand's width away, feeling for the heat. Too cool and the collar stays limp. Too hot and it browns in half a second, and Thomas has no other Sunday collar. This is the piece she has been protecting all day, and she is judging its fate by the warmth on her own face. And Alice is still up, sitting by the leg of the table, watching the iron come close to her mother's cheek. She does not ask what it is for. She is not told. She simply takes in the movement, heat-tested against a cheek, water-tested with a finger-tip, the way you take in something you will not need for 20 years. And a collar like that is almost impossible to keep on a body that does any real work. Spotless white survives exactly as long as its wearer sits still. Bend, sweat, lift, haul. The way Thomas does 6 days a week, and it goes soft or dirty within the hour. Which is why, for a different kind of man, one who never bends or lifts at all, that same collar could stay perfect from Monday to Saturday. And a man who could appear day after day in a crisp white collar was quietly telling the world exactly that he did not work with his hands, that his work was clean, that someone somewhere, almost always a woman he did not have to pay, kept him in fresh white linen. The collar became the badge of the man who worked at a desk, not a bench, and the badge outlived the wash-house entirely. We still call that man a white-collar worker. Every time you hear the phrase, you are hearing the ghost of this exact moment, Martha, past nightfall, burning her hands to press a collar so stiff and so white that it proves the man who wears it never had to do a day of work like hers. Work like hers, because the man in the white collar did not wash that collar, or starch it, or press it. She did, which is the question left open a chapter ago, arriving now with an answer attached. The whole endless chain of this day, hauling, boiling, scrubbing, rinsing, squeezing, starching, ironing, belonged, without exception, to the woman. Not because it was light work. You have watched all day how far from light it is. Measured in pure muscle, it outweighs much of what men were paid for. It fell to her for a simpler and harder reason, because the age had decided that the home was the woman's whole world, and everything inside it was hers to carry, no matter what it weighed. Her strength was spent in a place no wage ever reached, and no one outside the door ever saw. That was the arrangement, the hardest physical labour in the house, done by the person the century insisted was too delicate for the world of work, done in private, unpaid, and expected every single week of her life. And for the woman 2 doors down, the widow, it is not only expected, it is everything. The same irons, the same starch, the same burns, but done for other people's collars for pennies late into the night. There were women who pressed and smoothed other families' linen for a living, widows working a borrowed mangle bought for them by neighbours after a husband's death, earning by the piece what stood between them and nothing. For them, the skill in Martha's aching arms wasn't only pride or duty. It was rent, it was food, it was the thin line that kept a family off the street, drawn night after night in starch and hot iron. At last, the final collar is pressed. It stands on the table stiff and white and perfect, and the basket beside it is full of them. A whole week of whites, every white shirt and sheet the family owns, clean and bright and hard and ready, the stranger's fine cloth folded carefully on top. The washing is done. Not the night. There is still the kitchen to put back, and the fire to see to, and the small last things nobody counts as work. But the wash that started before dawn, in the cold, on Martha's knees at a dead fire, is finished, and it is finished past dark, with her hands burned, and her back aching, and one lamp burning low. And there is still one thing left to understand about this day, the oldest question of all, the one hiding inside the day's own name. The tubs go back against the wall, one stacked inside the other, in the same corner they have lived in for years. The copper gets its lid. The washboard goes up on its hook by the door, where her hand will find it in the dark next time without looking. Everything in this kitchen has a place it goes back to on a Monday night, because everything will be wanted again in exactly 7 days, not 6, not 8. 7, ask Martha why, and she would look at you strangely. Monday is simply when the wash happens. It is not a decision, any more than Sunday is a decision. Her mother washed on Monday. Every woman on this street washes on Monday. The whole day, with all its cost and danger and aching, arrives on the same square of the calendar every week of her life, and no one has ever needed a reason for it, which is exactly why the reasons are worth digging up. Because there are several, and they stack on top of each other, and the last one is the one nobody says out loud. And she is not doing any of it alone this morning. Before the sun came up, smoke went up from every chimney on this street, within the same half-hour, no clocks set together, nobody calling out a time, just women all along the row kneeling at cold grates and lighting the same fire on the same morning. Martha cannot see through a wall. She does not have to. She knows that when she was down on her knees in the dark fighting damp kindling, so was the woman on either side of her, and so was every woman on the next street, and the one after that. Whatever else Monday is, nobody on this row goes through it by herself. The bottom of that stack is Sunday. Sunday is the day of rest, and the day of church. And church is where a family is seen. So the clean clothes have to be ready by Sunday, washed, dried, starched, and pressed. Work backwards from that, and you need the whole week. Wash Monday, and if the weather turns and the drying takes 3 days, you still have time. Wash on Thursday, and one bad sky puts your family in dirty collars in front of the whole church. Monday is simply the day that leaves the most room for things to go wrong, room for the weather, and room for nothing else, because Monday itself has no give in it at all, which is why yesterday's dinner is still sitting covered in the pantry. Sunday's dinner is the biggest meal of the week, cooked large on purpose, and what's left goes cold into Monday. That is not a coincidence. It is the plan. On the one day a woman has no hands free to cook, the family eats yesterday's meat cold, and nobody has to stand at a stove. The Sunday roast and the Monday wash are two halves of the same plan. But not every part of that plan was theirs to make. In the towns, the hardest reason of all came from outside the house entirely, and no woman had a say in it. Water did not arrive when you wanted it. In cities where water was piped in at all, it came to each street on set days, turned on for a few hours, and then gone. If your water day was Monday, then Monday was your wash day, and wanting a different day changed nothing. The day was chosen for these women by a tap somewhere across the city, chosen for them by the water, and chosen again, harder, by something with no pipes at all, something Martha could hear through the window on any afternoon in the voices of children in the street, because there was a rhyme, a real one, known all over the country, taught to girls the way nursery rhymes are taught. It went through the days of the week and judged the women who washed on each one. Wash on Monday, and the rhyme approves, you have the whole week to dry. Wash on Tuesday, and you're not far wrong, Wednesday and Thursday, and it gets cooler with you. By Friday the rhyme is openly unkind, and the woman who leaves her wash until Saturday gets called. In the last line, a word we would soften today, an old insult for a woman too messy, too lazy, too far gone to keep a decent home. And that was a children's rhyme. Girls learned it the way girls learn any rhyme, chanting it, skipping to it, long before they were old enough to understand that they were being measured by it, and that one day they would be measured by it themselves. The day of the week you did your washing was a public statement about the kind of woman you were. Not the quality of the wash, the timing of it. A woman who washed late was not just behind on chores, she was, in the eyes of her neighbours, and in the words of a rhyme her own daughters sang, a lesser woman. This is the same street that reads your washing line and grades your family on it, now grading you a second time on which morning you started. There was no way to be invisible. Wash on the wrong day, and the street noticed. Wash badly, and the street noticed. There was one correct day, and one correct result, and everything else was a mark against you. Which is how Monday became what it is in this story, not just a day on a list, but a fixed date every woman on the street keeps at the same hour, watched by everyone on pain of being thought less of. And there is one more thing the day left behind, still sitting in the language you use today. This day, cold, endless, wet, the day of most work and least joy in the entire week, got a name. People called it Blue Monday. The name is usually explained by the blue that went into the rinse water, and that is part of it. But the word blue was already drifting toward another meaning, low, heavy, sad. Whether the day was named for the colour in the tub or the mood in the room, the two ran together, and the phrase outlived the copper and the mangle and everything else in this kitchen. When someone today calls a grim Monday a Blue Monday, they are repeating a phrase that started in rooms exactly like this one, on days exactly like this one, from women exactly like Martha. And underneath all of it, the schedule, the rhyme, the judgment, the name, there is still one thing left to explain. The oldest, deepest reason of all, for why this work could never be put down, never be done lightly, never be considered finished. It has nothing to do with neighbours or reputation or the day of the week. It is the belief we left waiting hours ago, back at the boiling copper, and it is the heaviest thing in this house. The last thing Martha washes tonight is her own hands. Cold water, the last thin sliver of the soap, the cracks stinging as she works it into them, and she does it without thinking, the way she has done it every night of her life, because you do not go up to your children with the day still on your hands. Watch that, and you're watching the whole thing in miniature. Because what she has been fighting since before dawn was never really the dirt on the cloth. Go back for a moment to the boiling copper this morning and to what she believed was happening in it. She believed she was driving out the thing that makes people ill, that sickness lives in dirt and rises off foul cloth as a bad smell, and that heat and soap drive it away. She was wrong about what it was. She was right that it was there, and that half-right belief is the reason this day has no natural end, because a belief like that does not stay in the kitchen. Listen to how a magazine of the time wrote about soap, that soap should be counted as a way of reaching God, and that a churchman who recommends good things ought to recommend soap. Soap sold by the block at the corner shop, cut with a knife, kept dry in its dish, spoken of in the same breath as prayer. That is what happened to washing in this century. It stopped being a practical matter and turned into a moral one, a sign of what kind of person you were on the inside. Ministers preached it in church. Children were taught it in school. Clean cloth was no longer just clean cloth. It was proof of a decent soul. And proof like that is never finished, because if dirt is only dirt, then washing has an end. You get the shirt clean and you stop. But if dirt is sickness, and dirt is also sin, then there is no line where you can put down the brush and say, enough, that's done. A shirt can always be whiter, a floor can always be scrubbed again, and every inch you don't reach is not just an untidy corner. It is, in the language of the age, a small failure of character, and, in the language of Martha's own fear, a door left open to whatever takes children in the night. That is what it cost. Not just the hours, though the hours were enormous. It is why, at 9 at night, with her back aching and one lamp left burning, Martha will still go back and look at a collar she has already pressed. The work could never be finished, and a woman could never quite be clean enough, because the test wasn't dirt any more. It was goodness, and goodness has no finish line. Every Monday she reset a task that could not be completed. And on the days when the sickness did come anyway, when a fever went through the street, when a small child in one of these houses did not get better, the belief turned on the woman who held it. If dirt let sickness in, then somewhere somehow she had missed something. That was the quiet, terrible sum living inside a theory that was wrong. It handed mothers who had lost a child a reason to look at their own hands. So look at those hands one more time, and hold two things about them at once, because both are true. The idea was wrong, and it was hard and unfair on the women who carried it. And yet Martha was doing exactly the right thing. Every Monday she boiled the sickness out of her family's cloth. She scrubbed and rinsed away what actually carried disease. She kept her children in clean linen and a clean house at a time when that was one of the few real defences a family had. She had the wrong reason and the right actions, and the right actions are what saved lives. She could not have told you why it worked. It worked anyway. Every one of those Mondays, at a cost you have now watched hour by hour, she was protecting her children with a truth she would not live to hear explained. And that belief did not die with her. It came all the way down to you. The feeling that a clean house is a good house, that fresh sheets are somehow virtuous, that scrubbing something spotless makes you a better person, and not just a person with a clean floor. That is Martha's century, still talking. The science changed. Germs were found, proven, taught in schools. But the older idea, the one that says clean is good and dirty is shameful, never quite let go. You inherited it from women who scrubbed themselves raw for it, believing their children's lives hung on the outcome. Which is why the last hour of this day is the one that matters most. The work is finally done, the whites are white, the collars are hard, the basket is full, the fire is going out. And Martha, who has been awake and moving since before the sun came up, is about to do the only thing left on this Monday that belongs entirely to her. The kitchen at the end of Monday is quiet in a way it has not been since before dawn. The copper has gone cold, the tubs are empty and set on their sides. The irons are cooling on the hearth. The room still smells of soap and hot cloth and damp, and the air feels heavy the way it does after steam. But the noise is gone, no slap of cloth on board, no crank turning, no water moving. Just the fire dying down and one lamp, and Martha standing in the middle of it. She does what she did last night, though she is too tired to notice she is doing it. She checks the basket of whites, folded and stacked and ready. The stranger's fine cloth on top, perfect, ready to go back tomorrow for the money it will bring. The starch pot rinsed, the irons off the fire, so nothing scorches in the night. The line outside, wiped and empty, coiled where the frost won't get it. Every small thing set right, so that tomorrow can begin without a fight. It is the same round of checks she made in the dark 18 hours ago, at the other end of this day, when it was all still ahead of her. And her hands, the whole day is written on them. This morning they were already old hands, cracked at the joints, the skin thick and tough from years of soda and hard soap, the kind of hands she folds out of sight in church. Tonight they are those hands plus one more Monday red across the backs, sore at the fingertips from cold rinse water, a shine on one knuckle where the iron caught her and she did not stop to look at it. Tomorrow the cracks will sting when she puts them in water. By Thursday it will have faded. By next Monday it will start again. That is not damage from one bad day. That is the slow, ordinary way a body pays for a life of keeping other people clean. Upstairs, they are all asleep. Thomas, who will put on a white shirt in the morning and go out into the world wearing the proof of her work without ever thinking about it. James, 7 years old, who carried water all morning and turned the mangle with his fingers well back from the rollers, exactly as he was told. And Alice, 5, who spent most of today down on the kitchen floor, watching her mother test an iron with a wet fingertip, watching her lift a shirt out of the rinse and hold it to the light, watching the whole long shape of a Monday from the floor of the kitchen. She was not being taught. Nobody sat her down, but she saw all of it, the way Martha once saw her own mother do all of it, and in 15 or 20 years in a kitchen of her own, her hands will already know things she cannot remember learning. That is how this work is passed down, not in lessons, in watching. Martha damps the fire down for the night and puts out the lamp and climbs the stairs in the dark the way her mother did. Behind her the kitchen sits cooling and empty, and for 6 days, done. The basket of white is stacked by the door where the morning light will find it. On Sunday, that white will walk to church on the backs of her family, and the street will see it and think nothing at all, which is exactly the point, because not being noticed at all is the whole prize. Nobody notices a family that is holding together. They only notice the one that isn't. And on Sunday night, when the plates are cleared and the house is quiet, she will come back down to this kitchen with a candle and sort a pile of dirty clothes into whites and colours and wool, and fill the copper bucket by bucket and start it all again. But not tonight. Tonight there is nothing left to lift, nothing left to boil, nothing left to check. The whole enormous weight of a wash day is behind her, and the next one is 6 days away, and for the first time in 18 hours, nobody needs anything from her hands. She lies down in the dark beside her sleeping husband, in a bed made with sheets she boiled herself, and the ache in her back settles, and her hands stop, and the house holds its warmth, and Monday is over. Sleep comes fast on a wash-day night. It always does. So that was one Monday, in one small brick house, in 1870. One woman, one copper, one line of white cloth strung up where the whole street could read it. And it happened again the next week and the week after that, and in every house on that street at the same hour, for the whole of her life, and her mother's life, and her daughter's life after her. And now think about the machine we started with, the one standing quiet in the corner of your own home tonight. Tomorrow or the next day, you'll put an armful of clothes into it and press a button and walk away. Whites and colours together, most likely, because the colours don't run any more. Hot or cold, whichever you like, because nothing gets cooked in permanently now. No fire to build, no water to carry, no board, no soap that eats your hands, no boiling pot on the floor, no rollers waiting for a child's fingers, no starch, no iron heated in the coals, no line, no weather to gamble on, and no street reading the results. That machine does not just save you a job, it gives you back a whole day of your life, every week, that women spent for thousands of years and never got back. And there is one more thing you have now, though you may not have noticed you were given it. You know why the shirt is white? You know what a white collar meant, and where the word came from that you still use for a certain kind of job. You know that a stiff collar was armour, and that blue makes white whiter, and that a line of clean washing was once a family's credit, its character, and its standing in the world, all hanging in public on a piece of string. The next time you see a white shirt on a hanger, on a stranger, on yourself, some part of you is going to remember what it used to cost. Before the last of the fire goes out, one quiet note. If this story kept you company tonight, subscribing is what keeps these long nights coming, more small rooms, more ordinary days from a world that closed behind us. And if you're still here, still awake, stay a moment longer. The very last of the night is the softest part, and it's just below, because there's one last thing worth taking with you into sleep. Everything you heard tonight, every hour of it, was somebody's ordinary Monday. It was not a disaster or a great event or anything that made the history books. It was a woman getting up in the cold and doing the work and doing it again and doing it well for people who would never see it. Almost none of them were written down. Nobody built a statue for any of it. We only know about it because the tools lasted, and the old household books lasted, and a handful of women wrote down a few lines about their hands. Tonight, for a few hours, one of those lives got its attention back. And now the house is dark, and the whites are folded by the door, and the fire is burning low, and Martha is asleep upstairs with 6 days between her and the next one. Sleep well. There's nothing left to carry tonight.